slowdown can be kept discreet and not filter over in different nations to their broader service sector economy. What's the evidence your sprawling Bloomberg team sees?
Well, we had more evidence of that a few days ago than we have today, because we've seen some pretty bad PMI numbers come out of the euro area, driven by a really shocking decline in the Germany PMI. And we know, obviously, Germany's the key economy when it comes to European momentum. And what is worrying about those numbers is it's now not just manufacturing. We knew that there's a global manufacturing recession, but that's just that's a relatively small share of most modern economies these days, and it had not fed through into the service sector, into the consumer-driven domestic demand, until we see these numbers, where actually now we see the services side weakening, and that is a concern. I guess it also backs up what the European Central Bank did the other day, where they did take action and did restart that bond purchasing program.
Stephanie, you're terrifically well positioned to give us some insight as to what is happening with policy on the continent, not just on monetary policy, but also fiscal. There is so much speculation on this side of the Atlantic that Germany might be inching slowly, very slowly, towards doing some kind of fiscal stimulus. I haven't heard that from the policymakers, Stephanie. I'm just wondering what you're hearing and what your insight is right now on that.
Yeah, and funny enough, I was just talking to our economists about that, saying that we should do. We had done an assessment of what scope Germany had, but I thought we should crank up the pressure, just as the European Central Bank has been talking more and more about the need for fiscal action, especially from Germany and the Netherlands, because they're the ones who've actually got the scope to do something. Look, we have seen. The Finance Minister Olaf Scholz isn't like his predecessor Wolfgang Schäuble. He's not quite as strict when it comes to these things. He's talked about, even in the Bloomberg offices, he's talked about being a tiny bit more relaxed, and in the summer I think did talk about potentially spending a relatively small amount more, but if you are now looking at a German recession, which on the face of it these numbers are pointing to after their very weak previous quarter's GDP, then they may have to move a lot further than inches, and I'm not sure that the political class as yet is ready for it. Everyone outside Germany is always ready for German stimulus. Germany, not so much.
Yeah, let's go back to, Civics 101, European style. Does the ECB have any kind of power or suasion? See, I use that with Stephanie Flanders. It's a fancy word.
Suasion.
Do they have suasion to tell the Germans what to do in fiscal policy?
No,
my take is they've zero.
No, and or what you might call the US the bully pulpit. They've been using a bit more of the bully pulpit insofar as they have one, but certainly they're aware of the limits to how far they can go. They can talk about the general need for fiscal stimulus. They even was a little bit more specific. Mario Draghi talked about a particular program that the Dutch had mentioned, a potential investment spending in Netherlands. They kind of endorsed that in the last press conference, which was surprising in itself. I don't think you've ever seen an ECB president single out a bit of national policy and said this is the right thing to do. But remember, going the other way, they would be the first to complain if finance ministers started talking about what the ECB should do, and they do complain. So they do have to respect that independence, even though they know the fiscal would be more effective at this point than cutting interest rates even further into negative territory. You've got mortgages in Germany now with negative rates. You have to give back less money than you borrowed in 20 years' time.
I just figured it out. Stephanie Flanders is on a Thomas Cook tour, and she's got some free time.
She's stranded. She's one of the 150,000 people stranded abroad. I hope she's not. Stephanie, just as a final question, the way Europe works typically is crisis, then suboptimal policy response. That's typically what happens again and again across the continent. I'm just wondering, Stephanie, I don't expect you to have the answer for this, but just to explore it with us. What's crisis in Germany? What's a crisis? Because to me, looking at this data right now, we're basically in recession. But what's a crisis for them? What would really push them to deliver something that looks just a little bit something like what they should be doing?
Yeah, it's tricky. The German budgets have more of what they call, if we're using our fancy words, our automatic stabilizers. So there'll be stuff that kicks in just from the economy slows down. They'll end up with a bit more spending, probably more than the US does with the similar slowdown in GDP. But you're right that they've had a long recovery. Unemployment is very low. Wages have been going up. If you go to Germany, it doesn't feel like an economy on the edge of recession. I wonder if we had a formal recession in the next few months, there might not be a sense that it was really going to continue, because it's so driven by this export slowdown. So I'm not sure they would feel that there was a big crisis, although there is more and more debate in Germany about some kind of fiscal action.
Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Head of Oliver Economics, getting us nicely started there on this linkage of the European economic discussion into what we see in the United States. John?
Are you going to be one of those people that gets picked up by a government-organised plane to come home? Can you imagine that, being stranded abroad?
I can't.
And waiting for the government to sort you out a flight back.
It's original.
As our producer says, it depends where you're stranded.
I took Thomas Cook once. I did a tour down below 14th Street. Thomas Cook arranged the package.
You actually went downtown.
I went once below 14th Street. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stock futures remain narrowly mixed this morning. Investors are assessing some disappointing economic data from the Eurozone and remain cautious ahead of next month's planned high-level trade talks between the U.S. and China. S&P futures are flat, NASDAQ futures up 10, Dow futures down 28. Crude oil is just below $58 a barrel. A new study concludes that President Donald Trump's Twitter attacks on the Fed are prompting investors to bet the central bank will bow to political pressure and lower interest rates. The study comes from economists at Duke University and the London Business School. The 178-year-old UK travel company Thomas Cook has collapsed under a pile of debt after talks with creditors failed, forcing the British government to charter planes to bring home more than 150,000 stranded customers. The company filed for insolvency early today, sparking chaos for travelers. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the ad.
1 in 4 children believe potatoes grow on trees. 1 in 5 children believe fish fingers are made from chicken. And 1 in 8 adults believe the moon landings didn't happen. People believe all sorts of strange things. Some people believe that insurance companies try to avoid paying claims. But last year, Zurich paid 99% of insurance claims made by their UK customers. Zurich, an insurance company you can believe in. To find out more, visit zurich.co.uk/99.
At Jet2 Holidays, we like keeping things simple. If you do too, our great value all-inclusive holidays are simply perfect. Meals, drinks and snacks are all included in the price. So book now with just a £60 deposit. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. Subject to availability and conditions.
We could play epic music, or we could speak in an overdramatic tone, or even set off fireworks. But that's just not smarty. Instead, we let our offer do the talking. Right now, you can grab 25% off our unlimited data SIM. That's just $18.75 a month with no speed restrictions, no credit check, and no long contract to tie you in. Now that's smarty. Just search Smarty Mobile and switch today. It's easy. Offer available for a limited time only. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Summer wardrobe weather struggles? Introducing convertible wellies. 1 minute they're Wellington boots, the next flip-flops.
Convertible wellies, never going to happen, is it? But with the new BP Me Rewards card, getting more of the summer essentials you love more often will. Search BP Me Rewards to find out more.
When it comes to keeping your small business valuable information safe, Dell Small Business Technology Advisors can recommend tailored security solutions, like computers with Intel Core processors, servers, storage, networking, plus industry-leading monitors and software. Running your own small business is a big challenge, but with the right partner, it's a lot easier. To speak with an advisor today, call 0800 085 4878. That's 0800 085 4878.
I am a force for good.
I am a force for courage.
And for calm.
I am a force for safety.
For fairness.
For leadership.
I am a force for the future.
For compassion.
For my community.
I am a police officer.
And I am a force for all.
Be one of the 20,000 new police officers and be a force for all that you believe in. Search Join the Police.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Surveillance alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Ferro. For our audience worldwide, we're live on Bloomberg Radio. Your economic indicators will be brought to you through the week by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, JD Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Speaking of the economic data, let's have a little look back and then a little look forward. Looking back at some Eurozone data out earlier this morning. Dreadful. The manufacturing read for the whole of the continent, for the Eurozone, for the Monetary Union, coming in at 45.6. The survey was 47.3. Services rolling over from the previous month as well. And the composite index just about above 50 at 50.4. This all ahead, 1 hour and 15 minutes away, Tom, of the US PMIs, which I believe will be a little bit more closely watched than they typically are.
Right. And I remember when nobody paid attention to them, and now they're sort of the first of the month litmus paper. We get the key U.S. numbers October 1st-ish, which is fine, but it's amazing, John, how they become more important.
Ahead of the ISMs, did you say, coming out on October 1st?
The PMI, ISMs, they're all important. Julia Coronado joins us right now. Before we get into the repo discussion, Julia, why are the PMIs and ISMs become so important? Is it because the math is better?
Well, I think with the market measure that we're going to get this morning, it's useful because, as Jonathan mentioned, we get it twice a month. We get a preliminary read, then a final read. The other thing is that it's a consistent survey across countries, so it's comparable from the U.S. to the Eurozone to Japan, et cetera. So it's a useful, timely barometer.
Do you expect to see the same story that we're seeing in Europe, Julia, which is weak manufacturing, but perhaps some small signs that are showing up in services?
Well, that would be very important for the U.S. The consensus is expecting a little bit of a bounce in the services measure. We've seen service sector resilience in the U.S. so far, and that is absolutely essential because we don't expect the manufacturing sector to be snapping back anytime soon, and really the service sector has been carrying the entire weight of the economy.
Julia Coronado with us, Macro Policy Advisors. 1 minute ago, the headline comes out, and John, I guess we get used to this. New York Fed takes $66 billion of Treasuries, securities, and repo operations. So, Julia, they brought in full faith and credit, bills, notes, and bonds as a general statement, and they pushed out cash to whom?
To a variety of people, to banks and through banks to other financial intermediaries. So it is really liquefying the entire financial system through these operations, including foreign demand as well.
And then on Friday, we had the idea that big banks were reticent to do something with their cash or their securities, and the blame goes back to Basel. Is that the only way we fix this, is to deregulate the regulation?
That would be one road you can go down, but the Fed certainly knew that these regulations have been in place, and they made a decision to sort of explore the frontier of how much reserves were needed by the system, and they found the frontier. So we had a liquidity crunch on one of these periodic moments of elevated demand. They're going to probably move to actually increase the level of reserves in the system. I think that's
we found the frontier.
So, Julia, ultimately, does that mean expanding the balance sheet again? And when do you expect to see that?
Well, they've been very clear, signaling that this will be part of the October communication that we get from them, that they will explore these issues, make a decision by the October meeting. So that's when I would expect to see it from Chair Powell.
Former New York Fed President Bill Dudley writing an op-ed recently, and Tom and I are really looking forward to catching up with him in about an hour and 30 minutes' time. That plug for Bloomberg TV and for Bloomberg Radio. Julia, excuse that. But he said that you could focus on the bills and not further down the curve, and then the optics of it will improve, and that's just one way of communicating this is not QE. What do you think of that, Julia? Focusing on buying Treasury bills instead of going further down the curve to expand the balance sheet and increase reserves?
Well, I'm not sure that they're going to go that route when they have discussed this at the meetings this year, and they have been discussing these issues all year. They've sort of tied all of the balance sheet policy together under one investment policy. So both the reinvestment of the mortgages and treasuries, as well as balance sheet expansion, would all fall under the same policy, which currently is to sort of invest across the curve with the issuance patterns.
And now, folks, our Coronado dumb question of the day. I'm always qualified to do that. Does the policies, this arcane PhD trust dynamics of the repo market, does that mean that our listeners' CD at their bank is a lower yield than it would be otherwise?
No, this is unaffected. This doesn't affect retail yields. And in fact, one of the goals of keeping these markets liquid is that these kinds of funding crunches don't affect retail yields, that all of this is behind the scenes plumbing in the wholesale market, whereas the retail market should be stayed liquid.
We're losing Julia right now. Julia Coronado, thank you so much for wonderful explanations today. John, I would note the yield has gone down 6 days in a row on the 10-year, and 114% of our listeners listened to Dr. Coronado and said, wait a minute, if they take bonds in, that's price up, yield down, and it doesn't affect our real yield or nominal yield?
It depends what they
illogical.
do. It depends what they do. But we are back to 170 on a US 10-year. We're back to about 167 on a US 10-year. And yields have been grinding lower. And today's move just been pushed lower by what is happening with the data in Europe. Not pretty. The next stop is the US PMIs.
That's what Bill Dudley would say, is there's outside issues besides the repo.
There's a big weight on the long end of the yield curve.
Yes.
And that weight is Japan, it's Europe.
South Korea.
And it's some weakness in China too.
Well, it will be fascinating. Futures -3, a little bit of a deterioration in the tape as well. Again, 10 a.m. this morning, without question, our conversation of the day. William Dudley, Worldwide.
Now for the news in New York City, here is Michael Barr.
Jonathan, Tom, thank you very much. President Trump now appears to be acknowledging that he did in fact talk about former Vice President Biden when he spoke to the Ukrainian president in July. At the time of the phone call, the Trump administration had been holding back $250 million in aid to Ukraine that had been approved by Congress. Democratic Representative Jim Himes says that the conversation was improper and that efforts to impeach President Trump should move forward.
Extorting a foreign leader for the purposes of getting that leader to do your political work, to try to find dirt on your opponent, is extortion. It is using the assets of the United States of America and the public trust for your own corrupt, if you will, ends, certainly political ends. So, of course, it's an impeachable offense.
It comes as President Trump is in New York for the UN General Assembly. The president plans to meet with Ukraine's leader. The UK's top judges will rule tomorrow on whether Boris Johnson acted lawfully when he suspended Parliament. If the Supreme Court finds Johnson suspended Parliament illegally, he could be forced to recall the legislature, giving opponents of a no-deal Brexit time to thwart the Prime Minister's plans to leave by October 31st. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Report, brought to you by Burden Accountants and Advisors. Here's John Stashauer.
Tom, and Daniel Jones' first NFL start, he did something Eli Manning never did in his 16 NFL seasons. He led the Giants to a victory after they trailed by 18 points. Jones was solid throughout, did have a couple of fumbles due to Tampa Bay's pass rush. The problem was the Giants' defense that let the Bucs score every time they had it in the first half. But the defense stiffened in the second half, and Jones capped the comeback.
Jones takes the snap, back to throw, steps up, he's going to run. Jones to the 5, touchdown Giants! Daniel Jones on a 7-yard run on a 4th and 5 from the 7. And the Giants have tied it up with 1:16 to go.
And the extra point put them ahead. WFAN the call. They won 32-31 when Tampa Bay's Matt Gay, who made all 4 of his field goals but who had missed 2 extra points, missed a game-winning 34-yard field goal at the end. The big story of the day, Jones, 2 TD passes, 2 TD runs.
Exciting win, exciting finish there for us. We showed a lot of fight, and we, battled back after kind of creating a hole for ourselves there in the first half. As a team, we did a good job preparing and kind of focusing on what we needed to do to get ready to play this game. And I thought we had a good plan going in. We knew what to expect, and great team win.
In the win, Saquon Barkley, high ankle sprain, will have an MRI today. So the Giants get their first win. The Jets are still looking. Blown out at New England, 30-14. Luke Falk's first NFL start, not nearly as good as Jones's, only 98 passing yards. Rams last night won at Cleveland, 20-13. Yankees beat Toronto 8-3. Luis Severino's second start, another good one. Yanks half game behind Houston for the AL's 1 seed. The Astros clinched the AL West.